Did you know that more than 150 submarine films have been made since 1910? Or that the claustrophobic 1950s submarine thriller became Hollywood's ultimate test of masculinity under pressure? Dive with us into the decade that defined underwater warfare cinema. Before computer-generated special effects, these bold directors created bone-chilling tension with nothing but creaking hulls, the haunting ping of sonar, and the psychological terror of men trapped in steel coffins. Morning Departure, 1950. The catastrophe that launched a decade of underwater terror wasn't even supposed to be released. When HMS Truculent sank in a real-life 1950 disaster, killing 64 sailors, the studio nearly shelved this British nail-biter about survivors trapped in a sunken submarine. John Mills delivers a gut-wrenching performance as Lieutenant Commander Armstrong, a captain forced to decide which of his men will live and which will die when there aren't enough escape apparatus for everyone, a decision no commander should ever face. Critics called it unbearably tense, while the Royal Navy, recognizing its training value, used it for instructional exercises despite the harrowing subject matter. The film's eerie prediction of the truculent disaster, completed just weeks before the actual tragedy happened, spooked moviegoers and naval personnel alike. Producer Jay Lewis later admitted they filmed using a real submarine interior where men couldn't stand upright for more than 4 hours without severe back pain, leading to genuine discomfort that translated to screen tension. Director Roy Ward Baker insisted on shooting in chronological order, so the actors' increasing desperation as oxygen dwindled wasn't just acting. It was the result of days spent in the claustrophobic set, with limited ventilation. A young Richard Attenborough, playing a terrified radio operator with claustrophobia, later revealed he developed a genuine fear of confined spaces after filming. Released as Operation Disaster in America, it still ranks as Britain's most authentic submarine thriller ever made, with naval historians citing its influence on subsequent underwater rescue protocols. The Admiralty initially opposed its release following the truculent disaster, but ultimately supported it as a tribute to submarine service sacrifice. Michael Caine, in his uncredited film debut as a T-boy, later called it the most emotionally draining set I've ever experienced. Mystery Submarine, 1950. Hollywood had never seen anything like director Douglas Sirk's noir-infused U-boat thriller. Set in post-war South America, MacDonald Carey stars as American intelligence officer Brett Young, hunting a renegade Nazi submarine operating illegally after Germany's surrender. The film's shocking twist? The submarine's deadly mission isn't about revenge. It's about transporting stolen nuclear technology to a new Fourth Reich hiding in the Southern Hemisphere. Universal Pictures faced diplomatic protests from Argentina over scenes suggesting their government harbored Nazi fugitives, which ironically was historically accurate. Sirk, a German émigré who fled the Nazis, brought haunting authenticity to the claustrophobic U-boat sequences. Having grown up watching German naval operations, he insisted on technical accuracy that submarine veterans praised as disturbingly real. The film's most controversial moment, a former concentration camp prisoner confronting her Nazi captor in the submarine's confined quarters, was partially cut from American releases but restored in 2018, revealing the psychological horror Sirk originally intended. The submarine's interior scenes were filmed on a full-scale replica built by art director Bernard Hertzbrunn, who interviewed captured U-boat commanders for details about instrument placement and crew quarters. Actress Marta Torin, playing a woman recruited to spy on the submarine commander, suffered a panic attack during a sealed hatch sequence and had to be sedated. The underwater photography, revolutionary for 1950, was accomplished using miniature submarines in a massive water tank with milk added to create murky visibility. Today, Mystery Submarine is celebrated as the first Cold War thriller to blend WE trauma with nuclear-age paranoia, creating a psychological depth unusual for the era. Film noir historian Eddie Muller called it the most successful translation of shadowy urban anxiety to the confined terror of underwater warfare. Submarine Command, 1951. William Holden's portrayal of submarine commander Ken White set a new standard for psychological depth in military films. After making a split-second decision to dive his submarine during an attack, leaving part of his crew stranded on the conning tower to die, White spends the remainder of the film battling crushing guilt while preparing for a new mission in Korean waters. His 1,000-yard stare and emotional detachment created the template for tortured submarine commanders that influenced characters from Crimson Tide to Hunter-Killer. Director John Farrow broke naval film conventions by shooting the underwater sequences with a documentary-like starkness, avoiding the triumphant music and heroic framing typical of war films. The U.S. Navy initially refused cooperation until Paramount agreed to remove scenes showing crew dissension, fearing it would hurt recruitment. Farrow, whose own naval experience informed the production, fought studio executives to maintain the psychological realism, arguing that submarines aren't just war machines, they're pressure cookers for the human psyche. Nancy Olson, fresh from Sunset Boulevard, brings unexpected emotional weight as White's wife who can't understand his increasing withdrawal. Her character's line, "I'm married to a ghost who happens to be breathing," was reportedly taken from a letter Farrow received from a real submarine wife. The film's harrowing depth charge sequence, where White hallucinates seeing the faces of the men he abandoned, was so realistic that several real submariners reported flashbacks after screenings. Technical advisor Captain Edward Beach described it as the first film to accurately capture the psychological toll of command decisions. Holden later called it the most physically demanding role of my career, losing 18 pounds during the production's 47-day shoot in claustrophobic sets. To prepare, he spent 2 weeks aboard the USS Ronquil, experiencing a real emergency dive that he called the most terrifying moment of my life. The film's unflinching portrayal of post-traumatic stress, revolutionary for 1951, makes it not just a submarine thriller, but an early examination of combat psychology that remains relevant 7 decades later. Operation Pacific, 1951. John Wayne invaded submarine territory with this thunderous Navy recruitment booster that Warner Brothers rushed into production during the Korean War. As Commander Duke Gifford, Wayne's swagger barely fits inside the USS Thunderfish, where he battles both Japanese destroyers and personal demons over his failed marriage to nurse Patricia Neal. The film's remarkable depth charge sequences, with Wayne's face illuminated only by instrument lights as explosions rock the submarine, became the template for decades of underwater warfare scenes. The film became infamous for its technical inaccuracies. Real submariners howled at scenes showing torpedo reload times of mere seconds rather than the actual 15 minutes required. Despite this, the film's box office success cemented the submarine genre's commercial viability. Director George Wagner captured genuine tension in sequences featuring the submarine dodging depth charges, aided by Wayne's surprising vulnerability when confessing his fears to the ship's cook, a rare moment of doubt from cinema's most confident star. The production benefited from extensive Navy cooperation, filming aboard the USS Redfish in Pearl Harbor. Ward Bond, playing the submarine's crusty chief, spent so much time interviewing real chiefs that he incorporated their mannerisms and vocabulary, leading several submariners to ask if he had served. Patricia Neal later revealed that Wayne struggled with the confined sets, once becoming stuck in a torpedo room hatch, requiring filming to stop for nearly an hour, an incident the publicity department transformed into a story about the set being too small for Duke's heroic proportions. Film historian Paul Fisher noted that Operation Pacific marked the moment Hollywood realized submarine films weren't just war pictures, but psychological pressure cookers. Wayne himself was reportedly seasick during the 2 weeks of actual submarine filming, a detail the studio vigorously suppressed to protect his macho image. The film's massive success spawned 3 similar productions at competing studios, with producer Robert Fellows claiming it single-handedly revitalized the naval warfare genre for the Cold War generation. Hell and High Water, 1954. Samuel Fuller's bizarre techno-thriller pushed submarine cinema into bold Technicolor territory with this tale of an eccentric billionaire scientist who hires disgraced submarine commander Adam Jones to investigate a mysterious Arctic island where Chinese communists might be preparing to launch nuclear weapons. The film's outlandish premise, refitting a Japanese submarine with an international crew of scientific geniuses, masked its deadly serious Cold War anxieties and Fuller's characteristic exploration of moral ambiguity under extreme conditions. Fox studio head Darryl F. Zanuck demanded the film be shot in CinemaScope to justify the expensive new format, despite Fuller's protests that submarines were the worst possible setting for widescreen. Fuller responded by staging the most dynamic submarine interior sequences ever filmed, with his camera constantly in motion through the cramped set, creating a visual language for submarine films that remains influential. He later boasted, "I put that goddamn camera everywhere. They said it couldn't go, including inside torpedo tubes and airlocks." Widmark later revealed he nearly quit when Fuller insisted on shooting a flooding sequence with real water that nearly drowned 3 actors. "Sam wanted authenticity at any cost," Widmark recalled, "even if that cost was our lives." The production used a real submarine control room purchased from Navy surplus, with functional equipment that naval consultants had to deactivate to prevent security breaches. The submarine versus submarine battle finale, where Widmark rams an enemy vessel rather than firing torpedoes, was later copied by The Hunt for Red October and numerous other films. The film's most controversial element was Bella Darvey as the sole woman aboard the submarine, a French nuclear physicist whose presence creates tension among the crew. Darvey, Zanuck's protégé, struggled with the technical dialogue, requiring 49 takes of one scene explaining radiation effects. Despite mixed reviews, the film's bold visual style and apocalyptic themes made it a surprising hit in Japan, where audiences appreciated its anti-nuclear stance despite the Japanese submarine crew being portrayed as mercenaries. Fuller's direction of the claustrophobic combat sequences, influenced by his own World War II experiences, established many techniques still used in submarine thrillers today. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, 1954. Disney's most expensive live-action film to date revolutionized underwater cinema with its groundbreaking special effects and James Mason's definitive portrayal of Captain Nemo. Though more fantasy than military thriller, this Jules Verne adaptation featured the most realistic submarine interior sets ever constructed, influencing every submarine film that followed. The Nautilus's Victorian steampunk aesthetic, brass fixtures, elaborate organ, and oversized viewing windows created a visual vocabulary for undersea craft that filmmakers still reference today. Walt Disney himself fought the studio board for the massive budget, correctly predicting the film would run for decades. He personally supervised the construction of the 11-ton squid puppet used for the film's most famous sequence. The squid attack scene had to be completely reshot after the first attempt looked like a rubber toy in a bathtub, according to director Richard Fleischer. The reshoot, filmed at night with rain machines and explosives, nearly resulted in tragedy when a mechanical tentacle malfunctioned, almost crushing Paul Lucas. Kirk Douglas performed all his own stunts during the harrowing escape sequences, suffering 3 broken ribs that were kept secret to avoid production delays. Douglas later claimed the underwater sequences, filmed in the Bahamas, were more dangerous than any Western stunt I've done. The film's underwater cinematography, by Ralph Hammeress, set new standards for clarity and color that ocean documentaries would take years to match. The Nautilus design by Harper Goff became so iconic that the U.S. Navy's first nuclear submarine, commissioned the following year, incorporated elements of its distinctive profile, including the alligator hull configuration. The film's most enduring legacy was its influence on marine technology. Inventor Edwin Link cited the film as direct inspiration for his submersible designs, while Jacques Cousteau acknowledged its impact on popularizing ocean exploration. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev reportedly requested a private screening during his 1959 American visit, after which he told Disney The film convinced him underwater is where future wars will be fought. Disney's investment paid off spectacularly. The film remained in theatrical release for decades and inspired theme park attractions still operating today. Above Us the Waves, 1955. Britain's answer to Hollywood submarine spectacles came with this nail-biting true story of midget submarine attacks against the feared German battleship Tirpitz. John Mills returns to submarine duty as Commander Fraser, leading a suicide mission to plant explosives on the hull of Nazi Germany's most powerful warship hiding in a Norwegian fjord. Director Ralph Thomas's documentary-like approach captured the unbearable tension of the three-man crews in vessels barely larger than coffins, battling cold, mechanical failures, and German detection systems in one of World War II's most audacious operations. The film caused diplomatic tensions when it premiered in Norway, where locals objected to scenes suggesting Norwegian fishermen betrayed British positions to German forces. Producer William McQuitty arranged a special screening for Norwegian resistance veterans who confirmed the film's accuracy and helped smooth relations. The Admiralty initially opposed the project, fearing it revealed too many technical details of British X-craft submersibles, but eventually provided full cooperation, including naval vessels and technical advisors. Several surviving X-craft commanders served as consultants, including Commander Godfrey Place, who received the Victoria Cross for the actual mission. The production constructed functioning miniature submarines that were actually operated by the actors after weeks of training. Donald Sinden, who played one of the submarine commanders, developed severe claustrophobia during filming and required sedation for scenes in the mini-sub's interior. He later described the experience as like being buried alive. The underwater sequences, filmed in Scotland's freezing Loch Erebol, resulted in hypothermia for several camera operators and stuntmen. Mills insisted on performing his own underwater scenes, despite being 47 at the time, later calling it the most physically demanding role of my career. Despite modest success in America, the film became a cornerstone of British military cinema and reportedly inspired several innovations in special boat service training programs. Naval historian Nicholas Montserrat called it the most accurate portrayal of specialized naval operations ever filmed. The film's meticulously researched technical details about underwater demolition techniques proved so accurate that the Ministry of Defense requested several cuts before approving its release, fearing it might serve as a training manual for enemy forces. Cuts that were quietly restored for the 50th anniversary edition. The Enemy Below, 1957. The psychological chess match between American destroyer Captain Robert Mitchum and German U-boat commander Kurt Jürgens redefined submarine warfare cinema with its revolutionary approach, showing both sides with equal humanity. Director Dick Powell's masterstroke was casting German actor Jürgens to play submarine commander von Stolberg not as a Nazi fanatic, but as a professional sailor questioning the war's purpose. This balanced portrayal created unprecedented complexity for a war film, forcing audiences to recognize the humanity on both sides of the periscope. The film won an Academy Award for special effects, creating unprecedented underwater tracking shots that followed torpedoes to their targets. Effects supervisor Franz Planer developed new underwater lighting techniques that revealed the projectiles while maintaining murky realism, innovations still used in modern submarine films. The U.S. Navy provided the USS Whitehurst for filming, but after reading the sympathetic portrayal of the German submarine crew, withdrew permission to use their name in credits, creating the unusual situation where a film featured actual military equipment without official acknowledgement. The claustrophobic German submarine scenes were so authentic that several visiting Kriegsmarine veterans reportedly walked off the set, overcome by memories. Jürgens, who had served in the German army but opposed the Nazi regime, brought personal experience to his role, incorporating details like the captain's ritual of washing hands before battle, a superstition common among U-boat commanders. Mitchum, known for his relaxed acting style, spent time with destroyer veterans to capture the specific tension of anti-submarine warfare, learning to imitate the subtle postural changes officers made during prolonged hunting operations. The film's influence extended far beyond cinema. Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry acknowledged adapting the cat-and-mouse scenario for his famous Balance of Terror episode, transplanting submarine tactics to space. Naval tactical instructors at Annapolis used the film for decades to illustrate both technical procedures and the psychological aspects of undersea combat. Perhaps most remarkably, Mitchum and Jurgens became lifelong friends after filming, with Jurgens later revealing that Mitchum secretly rewrote much of the German dialogue to make it more authentic, drawing on conversations with German POWs he had met while serving in the war. Run Silent, Run Deep, 1958. When Clark Gable and Burt Lancaster locked horns aboard the fictional USS Nerka, their real-life tension ignited what many consider the greatest submarine film ever made. Gable plays Commander Richardson, obsessed with destroying the Japanese destroyer that sank his previous submarine, while Lancaster's Lieutenant Bledsoe questions his increasingly reckless decisions. Director Robert Wise captured the claustrophobic pressure cooker atmosphere by shooting in chronological order on a full-scale submarine interior where temperatures reached 110 degrees, creating genuine irritability among the cast that translated to screen tension. United Artists expected a standard war film, but got an existential battle of wills that influenced generations of submarine movies, from Das Boot to Crimson Tide. Lancaster, who co-produced, physically intimidated Gable throughout filming, deliberately exploiting the aging star's insecurity to heighten on-screen tension. Lancaster later admitted, "I wasn't acting in some of those confrontation scenes. I was genuinely challenging him to prove he was still Gable." The 57-year-old Gable, determined to maintain his leading man status, performed grueling physical scenes despite doctors' warnings about his heart condition, tragically foreshadowing his fatal heart attack 2 years later. Technical advisor Captain Edward Beach resigned midway through production, protesting scenes showing crew dissension as unrealistic. Ironically, the same day a real submarine crew mutinied in San Diego Harbor. Beach later reconciled with the filmmakers after submarine veterans praised the film's psychological authenticity. The film's revolutionary sound design introduced the ping of sonar as cinema's most terrifying audio effect, with sound engineer Gordon Sawyer recording actual sonar equipment and manipulating the pitch to create the haunting signature sound, now standard in submarine thrillers. Lancaster's production company insisted on casting actual submariners for most crew roles, including Don Rickles in his film debut as a seasoned quartermaster. The authentic submarine jargon, spoken at natural speed without explanation for audiences, set a new standard for military realism. Japanese audiences gave the film standing ovations when it premiered in Tokyo, with Admiral Taman Yamaguchi's widow calling it the first American film to show our Navy men as professionals rather than fanatics. The film's famous line, "We're not here to fight the Japs, son, we're here to sink them," became unofficial submarine service motto during Cold War operations against Soviet vessels. Torpedo Run, 1958. Glenn Ford delivered his most haunting performance as Commander Barney Doyle, faced with an impossible choice: sink a Japanese aircraft carrier even though his own wife and daughter are prisoners aboard its escort transport. This moral crucible produced the decade's most emotionally devastating submarine thriller, with Ernest Borgnine providing powerful support as Doyle's conflicted executive officer. The film's unforgettable central dilemma, military duty versus family, created psychological depths rarely explored in war films of any era. MGM's gamble on filming in CinemaScope and Metro Color paid off with Academy Award nominations for visual effects. The underwater miniature work by A. Arnold Gillespie established new standards for realism, using high-pressure air hoses to create perfectly scaled water displacement around the submarine models. Director Joseph Pevney, a World War II combat veteran himself, brought documentary realism to the submarine interiors while staging Ford's psychological breakdown with noir-influenced lighting and disorienting camera angles that conveyed his mental disintegration. The film sparked controversy for its unflinching depiction of a commander choosing military duty over family. The Navy provided technical support but distanced itself from the premise, with one admiral calling it dramatically powerful but operationally irresponsible. The harrowing sequence where Ford must fire torpedoes at the transport, potentially carrying his family, required psychological consultation for the actor, who became so immersed in the character that he experienced insomnia throughout production. Dean Jones, in an early dramatic role as a young officer, later revealed Ford remained in character between takes, becoming increasingly withdrawn as filming progressed. The climactic scene where Ford must give the order to fire on the transport containing his family was shot in one take, with Ford refusing to film it again, telling Pevney, "I can't go there twice." Borgnine, whose character must ultimately relieve Ford of command, called it the most emotionally draining day I've experienced on any set. The film's innovative use of Momsen lungs, submarine escape devices rarely shown in films, was praised by naval reviewers for its technical accuracy. Despite mixed critical reception, the film developed a cult following among submariners, with the Naval Submarine School in New London using its command decision scenarios in officer training until the 1980s. Up Periscope, 1959. James Garner brought his trademark charisma to this revolutionary hybrid of submarine drama and commando mission. As Navy frogman Lieutenant Kenneth Braden, Garner must infiltrate a Japanese-held island to steal vital code books, while Commander Edmund O'Brien waits tensely offshore in the submarine USS Shark. Director Gordon Douglas created a new submarine subgenre, the underwater special operations thriller, that would later influence everything from The Abyss to Crimson Tide. The film's innovative structure, alternating between claustrophobic submarine tension and open-water infiltration sequences, established a template still used in naval special operations films. Warner Brothers fought with the Navy over scenes showing Garner's character questioning orders, until real SEAL team predecessors intervened, confirming such tensions were realistic in special operations. Lieutenant Commander Roy Boehm, one of the first SEAL officers, served as technical advisor, incorporating actual classified underwater demolition techniques that had never appeared on film. The film pioneered underwater combat cinematography, with legendary aquatic director Rico Browning shooting groundbreaking sequences of Garner battling Japanese sentries in coral reefs off Hawaii's Kaneohe Bay. Garner performed many of his own underwater stunts after receiving training from underwater demolition team instructors, suffering a perforated eardrum during filming that delayed production for 2 weeks. Actor Alan Hale nearly drowned when his equipment failed during a night filming of submarine surfacing, requiring rescue by Hawaiian lifeguards hired as safety monitors. The film's realistic portrayal of submarine-deployed special operations was so accurate that the Navy requested several cuts before approving the final version, particularly underwater mapping techniques still considered sensitive in 1959. The film's success launched Garner's film career after Maverick and established the template for Navy SEAL movies decades before the teams became household names. The submarine commando combination proved commercially successful, spawning numerous imitators throughout the 1960s. On the Beach, 1959. Director Stanley Kramer transformed Nevil Shute's apocalyptic novel into cinema's most sobering submarine thriller, with Gregory Peck commanding the USS Sawfish, possibly the last functioning vessel on Earth following nuclear Armageddon. When mysterious radio signals from San Francisco offer a sliver of hope, Peck leads his crew on a desperate journey to find survivors, leaving behind Ava Gardner in an iconic shoreline farewell that defined atomic age anxiety. The film's devastating premise, that radiation will eventually kill all human life, created tension not from enemy action, but from the inexorable approach of invisible death. The film's revolutionary worldwide premiere, simultaneously screening in 18 theaters on all 7 continents, including Antarctica, generated unprecedented global attention. The Moscow premiere, attended by Soviet officials despite the film lacking official distribution in the USSR, became a cultural flashpoint in Cold War relations. The production became the first American film permitted to shoot in Soviet territory, with Peck personally presenting a print to Khrushchev, who reportedly wept during the screening, but dismissed it as propaganda for pacifism. Fred Astaire's dramatic debut as a cynical scientist stunned audiences accustomed to seeing him dance. Astaire, desperate to break from musicals, delivered his chilling explanation of nuclear annihilation with such clinical detachment that several preview audiences walked out. His realistic portrayal of a race car driver's suicide by carbon monoxide, filmed in a single unbroken take, remains one of cinema's most disturbing deaths. The film's haunting use of Waltzing Matilda as its theme created an indelible association between the Australian folk song and nuclear annihilation, with composer Ernest Gold subtly distorting the melody throughout the film until its final ghostly rendition over abandoned Melbourne streets. Controversy erupted when the U.S. government attempted to discourage theaters from showing the film, claiming it undermined NATO nuclear policy. Several military consultants withdrew from the production after reading the script, with the Pentagon issuing a 32-page rebuttal of the film's scientific premises about radiation spread. Despite this opposition, the film received unprecedented coverage, with Edward R. Murrow broadcasting his CBS program, See It Now, from the Australian locations, providing millions of viewers behind-the-scenes access to what he called the most important film of our time. The film's devastating final shot, an empty, wind-blown street beneath a banner reading, "There is still time, brother," became the defining image of Cold War existential dread. Peck later revealed he suffered clinical depression after filming concluded, requiring therapy to process the psychological impact of portraying humanity's end. Despite mixed critical reception, the film's cultural impact was immeasurable, directly influencing nuclear disarmament movements worldwide. Kramer later wrote that during the Cuban Missile Crisis, he received a telegram from Khrushchev with only 2 words, "Still time." The Atomic Submarine, 1959. The wildest submarine thriller of the decade came from unlikely B-movie director Spencer Gordon Bennett, who threw conventional underwater warfare aside for this tale of nuclear submarine USS Tiger Shark battling an alien UFO beneath the Arctic ice. Despite its low budget, the film's innovative blend of Cold War tension, sci-fi elements, and traditional submarine drama created an entirely new subgenre that would later influence The Abyss, Sphere, and countless other underwater sci-fi thrillers. The film's audacious premise, that the ocean depths might harbor threats more alien than Soviet submarines, expanded the psychological possibilities of underwater cinema. While major studios dismissed the concept as ridiculous, the film's striking visual design, featuring a one-eyed alien entity that communicates telepathically with the submarine crew, became an unexpected critical darling. The New York Times' Bosley Crowther remarkably praised its disturbing plausibility and genuinely innovative underwater sequences. Art director William Glasgow created the distinctive alien vessel using airplane parts, kitchen colanders, and modified television components, achieving a uniquely otherworldly aesthetic on a shoestring budget that influenced sci-fi design for decades. The film's nuclear submarine interior was constructed from discarded military equipment purchased for $750 from a Navy surplus auction, with actual control panels from decommissioned submarines providing authentic details no studio set could match. Actor Brett Halsey performed his own stunts during a flooded compartment sequence, suffering hypothermia that shut down production for 3 days. Producer Alex Gordon later revealed the inspiration came from a classified Navy report about unidentified underwater objects tracked by sonar, a document he obtained through his brother's military connections. The film's unexpected commercial success spawned dozens of imitators while influencing Japanese kaiju films like Atragon. Director Ishiro Honda specifically cited Atomic Submarine as inspiration for his underwater monster designs. The film's pioneering underwater battle sequences, combining miniatures, practical effects, and innovative lighting, established techniques underwater filmmakers still use. Most significantly, the film's premise of submarine versus alien craft reportedly inspired Arthur C. Clarke during early discussions with Stanley Kubrick about potential science fiction film concepts, eventually contributing elements to 2001: A Space Odyssey. Which of these underwater nail-biters keeps you up at night? Or did we miss your favorite claustrophobic 1950s thriller? We've debated whether modern, CGI-laden submarine films can ever match the raw tension these pioneers achieved with nothing but tight spaces, sweaty faces, and the psychological weight of the ocean pressing down. Can today's audiences even comprehend how these films reflected the existential terror of a world teetering on nuclear annihilation? Let us know in the comments below.